I'm your host and MC for this wonderful, exciting program, the first meeting of the Loyola University Economics Club. I'm Walter Block. I'm a professor of economics here at Loyola, and I'm the advisor to the Economics Club. And the first person I'd like to call upon to say a few words is Jennifer Morial, who is the president of the Economics Club. Jennifer?
Good evening to everybody. I'm Jennifer Moriale. I'm the president of the Economics Club. And I'm here honored and delighted to be here opening this event. It is really an honor to have this first meeting of the Economics Club hosting Congressman Ron Paul. And I just take advantage right now to introduce some of the upcoming events. The next one will be on September 14th. We'll have Pete Leeson talking about his new book. It's if I'm not mistaken, The Invisible Hook, okay? And he will talk about economics and piracy. Again, it's on September 14th. And then we'll have still to schedule, but we'll have our economics professor, Dan D'Amico, and our philosophy professor, Lloyd Vandal, talking about minimum wage. And also we'll have a panel about crisis investing with Doug Casey and Rick Rule. So I really hope that you will come, as many as you are today. Just let us know in advance so we can plan things. But I'll just step aside right now, and I'll give my word to Dr. Block again. Thank you.
If you want to be notified of these upcoming meetings, you can email me, wblock, B-L-O-C-K, @loino.edu, or just Google me and get my email address, and I'll keep you posted on these other events. What I'd like to now do is call upon my colleague and friend, Dr. Bill Lokander, who is the Dean of the Business School at Loyola University, New Orleans, to give a warm welcome to Ron Paul, after which I'll be formally introducing Ron Paul.
It's indeed a pleasure to welcome you all here after my first year as Dean at the College of Business at such a nice event. I want to welcome the students, our guests from the community to this event. The College of Business has adopted a mantra of awaken, enlighten, and transform as an educational process, awakening our students to the possibility, enlightening them about our possibilities, and hopefully through their Loyola education, transforming them through the 4 years or the graduate school that they're with us. Only in an open university where we can promote different opinions and dialogue and debate can a transformation process happen. And education is about transformation of our students. So I would like to welcome you here to what I think will be a very interesting evening that will definitely promote a dialogue and debate and hopefully start the transformational process for those who've come here. Thank you.
We have a few seats up in the front that were reserved for VIPs, but their VIP time has come and gone. So if you're of a certain age, and I'll leave this to you to determine, please come in the front and sit in these seats. And if you're not of a certain age, move forward, sit on the steps. You don't have to stand up there. Come on, there's plenty of steps here. And there are seats for people who are closer to my age than your age. So please come on down. The water is fine. Putting this conference together is a team effort. I was one of the people, but I was very fortunate to have colleagues who were very, very helpful. And I'd like to read off the names of the people who helped me put this together. And as you can appreciate, this is not a one-person activity. Special thanks to Valerie Alambro, Bill Barnett, Stuart Becknell, Rachel Benton, Susan Brower, Dan D'Amico, Terrell Fisher, Vicki Frank, Brian Funk, Meredith Hartley, Amy Keeler, Catherine Koppel, John Levendis. Pay attention, this will be on the quiz. John Levendis, Bill Lokander, who you just heard from, David Lukauer, Catherine McNair, Mary Sue Ulke, Mike Raquel, Phil Rollins, John Snyder, Chris Wiseman, Tracy Wolf, Janet Yoakum, and the following students: Jennifer Morial, who you heard from, Will Smith, Mark Melanson, Sarah Wagner, Alex Fournay, Matt Cole, Devin Sneed, Chelsea Manselik, Kevya Kize, Chris Fleming, and Nick Tuzinski. Thank you. Now I'm faced with a difficult task. Is there a problem, officer? Oh, you can't sit in the stairs? Well, happily, we have overflow rooms for people who are not able to sit here. I'm sorry. Boo, boo. No, no. No, I'm sure that's not his rule, and if it was up to him, we could all sit in the aisles, but we have to abide by the regulations. So we do have overflow rooms. We've got plenty of them. If you can't find a seat, and there are a few seats still here in the front, and please try to find a seat, but if you can't find one, we do have overflow rooms, and there are students in the outside who will direct you to the overflow rooms. There's one seat over here. There are 3 over here. No sitting on laps. I don't think that that's allowed. I'm not sure. Officer, are the people allowed to stand in the back? Okay, the aisles have to be clear. You can stand in the back, or you can go to one of these overflow rooms. I'm now faced with the task of introducing Ron Paul. And to a bunch of his rabid fans, if you thought that the applause I got was anything compared to what will ensue in about a minute, you ain't heard nothing yet, as they say. There's a cliche, a man who needs no introduction. Well, that's absolutely Ron's situation in this case. Well, how can I do it? I was thinking, well, maybe I'd go to the web or to his contribution to a book I'm editing on autobiographies of libertarians to which he's contributed, and I could base my introduction on the material. If I did that, we would learn where he was born, Pittsburgh, his career before politics. He was a doctor. He brought forth to the world 4,000 babies. His political record, he's the 14th Congressional District in Texas congressman. His run for president in 2008, scintillating. His money bombs, I think it established a world's record for one-day money raising of $6 million and change. An amazing thing. The books he has published, Challenge to Liberty, The Case for Gold, The Republic, If You Can Keep It. But I'm not going to do that. Notice how I want to brag about how sneaky I am, but I got it in there anyway. But I'm going to give a different kind of introduction. I'm going to make 3 points. First, there was a recent book came out that said these 5 people were the libertarian leaders: Ludwig von Mises, Milton Friedman, Friedrich Hayek, Ayn Rand, and Murray Rothbard. Well, they all deserve listing as leaders of the libertarian movement. Well, maybe debatable in 1 or 2 cases. But do you notice anyone missing? Well, obviously, Ron Paul deserves to take his place among these giants of liberty, and that's not debatable. Second, a personal confession. Before Ron, I was an anarcho-capitalist, a libertarian anarchist. I believe that government is best which governs least, and best of all is one that governs not at all. I was in favor of... I was in favor of full free enterprise, but now, thanks to Ron, I've embraced limited government. But very, very, very limited government. In my present view, the government should have one function, and only one function, and that is to force Ron Paul to run for president in 2012. You see, the non-aggression principle of libertarianism is all right, but if you want to get stuff done, you have to really use coercion. That's my new philosophy. The third point I want to make, but before I do it, I just want to say that Ron will be speaking for somewhere between 35 and 55 minutes, depending upon. He asked me how long he should speak, and I said, did you hear the one about the 600-pound gorilla? Where does he sit when he comes to your house? Wherever he wants. Well, What does Ron do when he's here? Does he wear a coat? Does he not wear a coat? How long does he speak? He does what he pleases. He's our man. But after his talk, and there will not be questions, but after his talk, he is willing to meet people and shake hands and take pictures. And if you'll line up orderly way, you can shake his hand and maybe get him to autograph a book or two that you brought of his, and that'll be the program. The third thing I want to mention in my introduction is I mentioned 3 other books of Ron's, but End the Fed, his most recent book, is now number 4, or yesterday was number 4 in nonfiction on Amazon and number 17 overall. End the Fed, we must have a book bomb for End the Fed. And as Jewish mother of the libertarian movement, I order you, upon pain of nagging and pouring chicken soup over your head and other things. I don't like to brag, but when it comes to nagging, world class. So if you don't buy the book, you're going to have me to contend with, and buy a dozen of them so we can have a book bomb similar to the money bomb. Well, that's my introduction. Now help me welcome Ron Paul.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's so nice to see such a large crowd. But it's so nice to see so many young people. It's the young people that are leading this revolution. And it looks like it's had a good, healthy start. Of course, this is a nonviolent revolution, but we do need changes. And I always am so happy to get out of Washington because I come and I meet you, and I actually get applause in Washington. You don't get that. Matter of fact, they don't even understand what I'm saying up there. But things are changing. Things are changing. We're making progress slowly. But the real progress is in the universities of this country, the young people of this country, even in the high schools. The young people are starting to realize what's really going on in this country and what a bad deal they're getting from an older generation, what's being dumped on you. So this is a real delight. A lot of people say that I've energized them and they've been encouraged. But the truth is, because there's been a good reception to the message of liberty, it really energizes me. So it's really a mutual effort here, and that is why I'm so pleased to come to the universities and see an enthusiastic crowd. But you know, I don't think I have to preach to you about you know, our problems in Washington, but there was a recent program that everybody knows about, and it's being heralded as the solution to our economic crisis. And that's a program called Cash for, what is that? Cash for, can you believe it that they figure that, you know, if you take some money, either steal it from somebody, borrow it from somebody, or just plain out print it, and pass it out, and it still buys stuff, that people actually take it? And then they buy cars. And then they come back and they say, you know, this last month, it's been good for business. It's been good for the car business. All this accelerated growth at the same time, of course, that's just more distortion. It just gobbled up a few sales now that might have come next month, and it might have been market driven. And the whole program was designed to help the poor people. But the poor people didn't have any money, or they didn't want to take on more debt. They didn't do it. What we did to the poor people is we took the cars available to them and hurt their marketplace. So the whole thing is insane. Other than that, I think it's a great program. But you know what? It reminds me of what they did in the Depression. Now, I was born during the Depression, but I don't remember it. I remember the tail end of it because I do remember World War II. But in the Depression, the Keynesians came into their time, during that time, that they said what we need to do, and it sort of sounds like what they're doing now, we need to stimulate the economy by putting more money into the hands of people. And we had a much more agricultural community in the 30s, so they said, you know, the farmers are having a bad time, they can't pay their bills. If the farmers just had more money, everything would be okay. So the economy tumbles, unemployment skyrockets up to 25%, people are starving, and all kinds of problems. So what did they decide to do? They said, get more money into the pockets of the farmers. What we'll do is we'll tell them to plow their crops under, and the prices will go up and everything will be okay. The people are starving, so we plow the crops on. And that's what essentially is a similar program to this Cash for Clunkers program, as if this would solve our problems. But anyway, I want to thank the Economic Club for inviting me here, and certainly Walter for getting me here. He seemed to get a little bit of attention. He even got a couple laughs. That was pretty good. But it is a real delight to be here. I haven't been here for a few years, and not too many years ago when the big hurricane hit here, quite a few people came from New Orleans. And matter of fact, many medical students came into my district in Galveston, and Galveston took them in. But guess what? Last summer, Galveston was on the receiving end, and they're still struggling to get back on their feet again. But so far, so good this year. But we, as a people, have a lot of problems and a lot of concerns. Sometimes I'm amazed that most of my talk I mention and try to describe what the problems are and how we got there. And lo and behold, I'm very pleased that most people see me as an optimist. I truly am. But I think the real reason for that is you can't be optimistic if in your denial. As long as we're in denial as a country and pretend that we can go on and on like this and everything is going to be okay, and you know it's not true, then people can become pessimistic over that. And I think that is what's happening right now. But, you know, they're talking about the deficits and the budget. We hear about that every day. Last week they confessed, the administration confessed they made a mistake. It was a minor mistake. It was $2 trillion. You know, they misjudged the national debt, the deficits over the next 10 years by $2 trillion. But they don't even know. They don't have the vaguest idea. They don't even know how much money's coming in next month. But all we know is that the spending will be more. That's what we do know. But July is our most recent report on the budget. And in July, they took in a little over $150 billion. And they spent $330 billion. So they had a $180 billion deficit in 1 month. And that is continuing. And in the midst of all this, what are they proposing? What's the administration talking about? They're talking about a trillion or $2 or $3 trillion national health control plan. They don't have any money, and they hardly blink an eye. And they're talking about expanding the war in the Middle East. We should do both things, not national health care, and start unwinding our wars around the world and start bringing our troops back home. This week, there was an interesting article by George Will. I imagine many of you read that, and it was significant because he is a well-known writer. He is seen as a conservative, not locked into the neoconservative camp, but tries to be objective. And he wrote a pretty strong article explaining what he thought we ought to do in Afghanistan. Basically, it was to get out. And so this made some news, and he quoted de Gaulle on this, and he said that de Gaulle said that you have to know when to quit. When things are going badly, you have to know when to quit. And de Gaulle went through some of those things when he was president of France, and that's what we need. We need to know when to just stop. And of course, I've been saying all along, I haven't been just saying stop. I've been saying don't start it. We shouldn't have started all this stuff. And yet there's nobody wanting to put the brakes on. So we elect a president who says that he wants to slow up the war and bring the troops home. I mean, if you're reading the papers and if you read the internet and you look at something other than the propaganda, the war in Iraq is far from over. There's more killing now than there was 6 months ago. If you look at Afghanistan, that's supposed to be the good war. And that's the liberal war, and everybody's supposed to go along with it. And Obama's been a little bit more honest about that. He wants to, all along, he said he wants to send more troops over there. So they're expanding that war. At the same time, they're bombing Pakistan. And you know, those who delight in the foreign policy we have that says every Muslim over there is a terrorist and we have to kill them over there before they come over here. Every time I read the news, like today, there was a Predator missile that hit Pakistan and 16 people were killed. And they want you to believe that every single one of those individuals were plotting against the United States with a nuclear bomb. And the whole thing is when I see it, I see exactly the opposite. 16 more families now have a moral obligation to do harm to Americans because that is their obligation. So as long as we're over there and as long as we're killing these people, and right now there's probably been 1 million Iraqis killed over there and 3 or 4 million displaced, and how many? We've lost 4,300. We have 30,000 serious injuries and hundreds of thousands now applying for help, you know, for post-traumatic stress syndrome and brain injuries. And it goes on and on. And, you know, I think it could have easily been prevented. Not so much to say that everybody who was against the war were right and the ones that wanted it were wrong, as much as to say it's the way we go to war that makes the difference. We haven't, gone to war as we did in World War II, and we haven't since then gone in a proper manner. A proper manner for me is if we think we have an enemy out there, the people ought to help decide through their members of Congress. There should be a vote on it and a declaration of war made and know where it's to be and when it's going to end. Now, George Will said it's time to quit, time to get those troops out of there and stop our loss of life. But he didn't go far enough. What he said was just back off, keep the bombers over there, and have a special forces there. And actually, he said Pakistan was much more important than Afghanistan. Well, I think America is a lot more important than all 3 of those countries over there. In the recent weeks, we have read about the bombings in Pakistan. And it's usually done with no great danger to us. They're done by predators, drones. And they go over and they drop bombs and kill people. And sometimes they kill, a devout enemy of ours, and sometimes, most likely, it'll kill others. But, it isn't even the military that sends the drones. This is how much out of control it is. It's the CIA that controls this. And the CIA, and I'll get into this a little later, it's more secretive than the Federal Reserve. So we don't even know, as members of Congress, what the CIA does. There was a recent publication that came out that said over the past several decades, we have attempted to assassinate 50 leaders of different countries. And most of the time, they were democratically elected. I mean, our pretense that we're over there to promote democracy is just not true. Some may believe it, and some may wish they could do it. But the truth is if the democratic elections occur and they're not our guy, that election doesn't stand. So you can be assured that Karzai is going to win. There's no way that Karzai is not going to win the election. But this is perpetual, the involvement. It goes back to 53 when they had an elected leader in Iran. And we went in and with the CIA got rid of Mossadegh. Actually didn't kill him, but got him out of power. And they do remember things like that. We would remember things like that. But our problem is when we get ourselves into trouble, we as Americans tend to forget. But the people in the Middle East, they never forget. They have long memories. We have too short of memories, and we don't look into what really causes our problems. But, if we had still some disagreements on when we should be involved and what we should do, I am absolutely convinced that the foreign policy of non-intervention and minding our own business and bringing our troops home, we're going to win that argument. Not so much that I'm going to give a grand speech on the House floor and convert everybody. It's not likely to happen. But guess what? They're going to run out of money. They've run out of money already, and we're barely continuing. So we're expanding the wars in the welfare state. We're running up these deficits, 180 billion a month, $2 trillion this year. We resort to borrowing from our arch enemy, China, and then we print money, and we're on the verge of real problems. Just this week, I was watching the news channel, and the commentator was there, and they said, and this was very serious. It had nothing to do with politics. He said, all right, tell me where you're investing these days. He said, well, the West is having some problems, and this country has this and that, and we haven't quite recovered. He says, I'm looking to put my investments in China and Vietnam. Now, isn't that amazing? Here in my lifetime, we were killing each other, in undeclared wars. And one of the disasters in my lifetime was, of course, the 60,000 men we lost, our men, and the millions that were killed by the Americans and the French. And we were going to teach them how to live like us and be westernized. And all those bombs and all that killing didn't do any good. We finally left, the communists took over, and there was violence and there were problems, no doubt. But lo and behold, our ideas were stronger than the ideas of communism. Communism in those years failed. And that's why the Soviet system collapsed. And the Chinese changed their ways. And now we do trade and invest and go to Vietnam. So we have won so much more in peace and trade than we ever could or ever did with the use of violence. One of the most serious policy changes that was made in the last administration, if you're interested in foreign policy, has been the Bush Doctrine. And the Bush Doctrine basically says that we have an obligation to start wars if they're necessary in our own self-interest. Well, I don't buy into that. I mean, that's not what America's all about. We don't start wars. And it's a fancier war. It's not called aggression. It is aggression, but it's not called that. It's called either preemptive or preventive war. You have a war to prevent war. It makes no sense whatsoever, but that has been the doctrine. So whether it's Republican or Democrat, we went in as Republicans into Iraq, and now we're into Afghanistan wholesale, plus Pakistan, plus the possibility of going into Iran. I mean, we're not backing off from Iran. When we go back next week, shortly thereafter, I assume they will bring up a resolution that went through our Foreign Affairs Committee, and that is to extend and amplify the boycott and blockade on Iran. Guess what they want to stop? We're not allowed to trade with them right now, which is exactly the opposite of what I want to do. I wanted to trade with Vietnam, not fight with them, and I certainly would like to see us trade with Cuba by now. We ought to do that. So the Iranians are our arch enemies, and they have a bunch of bad people over there, but until we're perfect, I'm not going to lecture anybody. I think if we want to change people, we should set a good example. But we have nuclear subs around there. The Russians have nuclear weapons. The Pakistanis have nuclear weapons. The Israelis have nuclear weapons. The Indians have nuclear weapons. And the only thing that they respect around the world is if you have a nuclear weapon. So wouldn't it make sense for maybe the Iranians to want a nuclear weapon, even though up until this very date that the United Nations inspectors have not shown where they are actually working on and could have a nuclear bomb in the next 3 years. So it's not like that's all they're living for. And they have abided by the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And yet here we are trying to provoke trouble with them. So we're going to put a boycott on. Guess what we're going to do? We're going to prevent gasoline from being imported into Iran. Now the theory for this is that it's going to make the Iranian people madder than the devil. They're going to, which I agree. But they say what's going to happen when the Iranian people get mad, when we put a boycott on them and try to squeeze them, they're going to get mad at the Ayatollah and throw the Ayatollah out. It's crazy because what it does is exactly the opposite. When outsiders come in and interfere, people come together. You neutralize the dissidents if you go and show that the dissidents are on our side and we want to do that. But just think of a country that we run around panicked over, and they can't even make gasoline. They don't have a refinery. So they're depending on imports for gasoline. And yet our foreign policy is driven by that narrow-mindedness, and yet I think the founders had it right. They gave us strong advice. Mind our own business, non-entangling alliance. Don't get involved in the internal affairs of other nations. Trade with people. I think this country and the whole world would be a lot better off if we followed that advice. We could save a lot of money by changing our foreign policy, which we must do. We must, not only do I think we should change our policy to be safer and have a stronger defense of our country, but for financial reasons. You know, this week they announced that Social Security recipients will not get a cost of living increase. They claim there's not that much inflation, which is a lie, because there's a lot of inflation out there if you have to pay a doctor's bill or buy food. But anyway, they say it's not, and that's not the most crucial thing. If we were really tightening our belt, I could understand that we could say no cost of living increase, but don't you think it should apply to the government first? But they're not doing that. At the same time, they don't hesitate for a minute to increase these military expenditures. So they nickel and dime things like Social Security increases, and they're not dealing with the big dollars. I say the big dollars, the easiest place to cut. The American people right now, by a majority, large majority, say that we've had enough of that. They don't support this increased militarism in Afghanistan, and we ought to start thinking about maybe saving $500 billion. We spend $1 trillion a year overseas, but we could save hundreds of billions of dollars by just bringing the troops home, not only from the Middle East, which would make us much safer, but why is it that we still have troops in Japan, Korea, and Europe? All this means it raises the possibility of young people in America between the ages of 18 and probably 30, that someday they're going to need you, and the volunteers won't be adequate enough, and that's why they keep draft registration on the books. And it is also the reason that the beliefs that I have every year that I've been up there offered legislation that would abolish draft registration of our 18-year-olds. This whole thing about 18-year-olds registering for a draft, first off, you really don't, they don't need you to register. They know where you are already. It's sort of a ritual to make sure you know that you belong to the government. It's sort of like the income tax. The income tax says they own all 100% of your income, and you are allowed to keep a certain percentage. And that is why even the conservatives are starting to talk like this. Well, we can't give you a tax cut because we have to pay for it. Well, you don't have to pay anything to allow you to keep what you earn. But this is their attitude. But the draft, of course, is the ultimate slavery, the ultimate tax on an individual's life. But then again, don't you think the 18-year-old owes a lot more to his country than somebody who's 45 or 50 and just made $10 billion up in New York over the financial system that we have? Oh, no, the 18-year-old owes it all to the country. You know, if we were truly trying to find out who owes the most to the country, it's probably the middle-aged guys who made a lot of money. But, of course, you know, in a free society, you don't have those kind of programs, and you don't have to worry about this. But it really bothers me when they make the case that it's good discipline, the 18-year-old owes his life to his country, and he has to go. And I was drafted in the military. I guess I wasn't quite as outspoken as I was then, because I got a draft notice, and I went. You know, and I served 5 years in the Air Force, but I was called up during the Cuban crisis. But at that time, I wasn't fully aware of and nor as intense about an undeclared war. But over the years, I became more intense about undeclared wars, illegal war spending, useless killing, and all the things that go on, and not really making the world a better place. We can achieve a lot more in peace through persuasion, setting good examples, have a healthy economy. And we don't do a whole lot of that. Right now, we bankrupted our country, and we're dumping it on your laps, and therefore these problems are very important to you and should be, but the whole thing is you have to know what to do about it. But that's the neat part about this whole story, is that there's only about two things you have to understand. We got into this mess because we never followed the restraints of the Constitution, and we could get out of it just by sending only people to Washington who will abide by the rule of law and get the government off our backs and out of our lives. In a personal way, I'd like to see them out of our lives. I happen to be considered a conservative individual, and I hope I can be seen as somebody with conservative values. But there's a lot of things that people do when they have their freedoms that I recognize that they have a right to it. It's easy for most Americans to understand that when we talk about religious values, because a lot of things go on in religious beliefs, some very bizarre. As long as these beliefs don't motivate others to kill and rob each other, we permit that, and we understand why religious beliefs are recognized. When it comes to social issues, we're much less tolerant. We'll think, well, this person likes to gamble. He likes to gamble on the internet. Oh, no, that's gambling is bad for you. So we have to make that illegal. Oh, what you smoke and drink and what you do with your personal lives and your lifestyle. Oh, we're going to make you a better person. If only the government could set up the rules, this world, just like we make the world a better place to live and make the world safe for democracy, we're going to make it a perfect world by all the rules and regulations on voluntary behavior among our people. The whole thing is it gets out of control. And right now, and I have become more firmly convinced of this over the years, and politically it has never gotten me in any trouble because I live in a very conservative Bible Belt district in Texas, but I've come to the conclusion that the war on drugs makes no sense whatsoever, and we ought to get rid of it. One thing I get a kick out of is getting on TV or radio shows with liberals, because liberals hate states' rights. You know, if you're a states' rights person, you're a bad guy, you know, and that means you're for slavery and this sort of thing. But when that comes up, I'll say, oh yeah, I think states' rights is a good idea. You know, in California, they have passed this radical law that says that if you raise a little marijuana in your yard and you happen to have a doctor's prescription and you're allowed to use this marijuana and you're sick and you can use this and you can feel better, and the state law permits it. But the federal government comes in and says, oh no, we overruled the state law and we put sick people in prison because they have used drugs that they think will help them. And so it's a good example that where both left and right could benefit by this principle of, taming down the monolithic state coming out of Washington. But the whole notion that they can make us better people or the world better or make the economy fair is all done. Many people who endorse that are well motivated. I don't, really challenge people's motivations, but I do challenge their ideas if they're wrong. And yet, if they do these things that don't hurt people, the line should be drawn that if you don't hurt people and you don't steal from people, that you ought to be permitted to make your own mistakes. But the most important thing, the hardest thing for people who are accepting the principles of liberty is assuming the responsibility for your own actions. Now, that's two-edged. Assuming the responsibility of your own actions means that you get to keep the fruits of your labor. Work hard and you get to keep it. But on the other side, if you go and mess up and your social behavior gets you into trouble, or you do dumb things and you get hurt, you can't go crawling to the government and telling the government to go to my neighbor and bail you out somehow or the other. But the opportunity really is available for us, I think, to make one of these points. Because of the trouble that we're in. We're into financial trouble. We're in trouble because people are angry. They're not quite sure what they're angry about. But I'm very delighted that most of the anger is being directed toward Washington, D.C. That's healthy. Except I don't mind, I guess. I have to confess, I don't mind it when they make one or two exceptions to the rule. But there's a lot of reasons why something has to be done. Something will be done, one way or the other. So if we do nothing, things will change. We'll have a much more tyrannical government. It's simple as that, because there'll be chaos and there won't be enough money. And that's what's happening. The states are running out of money. The municipalities are running out of money. The federal government's running out of money. But the magic is they still trust our dollar, but a little bit less every single day. But it's to me so ironic that our enemies, the communist enemies, are now our bankers, and we do business deals with them. And we're the spendthrift. We don't save, and we don't produce like we used to, and we're in much worse financial shape. So the opportunities are going to be there for your generation to do something about it. The only question is what do you want? Do you want to live in a free society, and a prosperous society, and a peaceful society, which sounds like a pretty appetizing program, or you're going to accept the idea that we're going to continue along this line and that we'll still continue with this confused notion about what rights are. This is the basic problem with what we do in Washington, because probably almost all liberals and a lot of conservatives believe that, the Roosevelt era redefined what rights are. My definition is that you have a right to your life, you have a right to your liberty, and you have a right to keep what you earn. But you don't have a right to demand something from your neighbor, which means you don't have a right to medical care. You don't have a right to education. And you don't have a right to be fed, and certainly with the collapse of the housing bubble, you realize that the people who were claiming a right to own a house didn't deserve many of those houses, and somebody was in on the take, and it was a big boondoggle, and look, what happens? The people who we were intending to help, the poor people, they're the ones who end up losing their houses, losing their jobs, and ending up with the inflation. They're ending up with a lot of people say, well, they don't pay income tax, so they don't deserve any consideration. But it's the average, it's a poor person, low middle income person, and middle class that suffers the consequence of inflation, and that's the real tax. The people who get to spend the money first, they benefit by it. Government spends it, banks spend it, corporations spend it, and then when it filters out there like it'll be in the next year or two, you're going to see the cost of living going up. And the cost of living is going up today. It's just that they don't admit it to it, because if the government statistics starts to show some negative signs, they change the way they calculate the statistic, and then tell the people, oh, there's no inflation and everything is okay. But the opportunity is here, and we must know exactly what we believe in. Now, the Constitution was far from a perfect document, probably the best written in history. But and if we followed it, we would be in a lot better shape. But there still were and are some imperfections on it. But there are some deliberate imperfections that drive the opposition to those who love big government, because they take the oath that I take, and believe me, they take it seriously, and they believe they're following it. It's just that they have been taught for decades now that the interpretation is entirely different. That the General Welfare Clause means that that's the welfare state. The Interstate Commerce Clause says you can regulate every single thing we do in our lives. And the one that really is rather bizarre is the Necessary and Proper Clause. That comes at the end of Article 1, Section 8. They list all the things that we are authorized explicitly to do. But then it said, whatever law is necessary and proper to enforce those laws, you can write them. But they take the Necessary and Proper Clause and use it for anything they think is necessary and proper. So the Constitution has no meaning. And that means it's an educational struggle. That means we need a whole new generation that understands the difference and has a different attitude about government. Some people say, well, you can solve all this problem by just putting more restraints on the lobbyists and controlling the money in elections. That's not going to do any good. It just goes from the top of the table to under the table. And there's a lot there already. But we have a right to petition our government. We don't want any curtailment of that. We don't want to tell you like McCain-Feingold, a bill that says, 90 days or 60 days before election, you're not allowed to electioneer. It's your money. I thought you were allowed to do that. But the problem is the system of government. It's the fact that government has so much control over our lives and over the economy, and they're passing out all the loot that they've stolen from us. So therefore, they have to, they have an incentive to do that. So even with that, you could stop it if you had only men and women of integrity in Washington that would resist this temptation to play this game, it would end. But the most important thing is getting rid of the power gravitating in Washington in order to clean up this mess. So over the years, I have noticed that our ideas have been spreading. When I first went to Congress in 1976, believe me, nobody had any idea what I was doing. They said, where is he coming from? What's he doing? This and this. Today, that hasn't happened. I was there for 4 terms. Then I went back to medicine, practiced for 12 years, and went back in 97. And things are a lot different, and they're a lot healthier. People are starting to understand it. And it was a real eye-opener for me in the presidential campaign. I was not discouraged a bit. Matter of fact, I was amazed that there was so much interest and so much excitement because I believe the message so sincerely and believe if we did the right things, we could get out of this. As long as we continue to do what we're doing right now to get us out of this economic mess, which is more of the same thing that got us in the mess, spending and deficits and borrowing and printing money, it's only going to make our problems that's much worse. So we know that this message is spreading like a wildfire. It is spreading. And I've tried to figure it out myself. I'm always pleased with how the message spreads. I'm pleased that I'm a part of it. But the truth is I believe it's the professors in the colleges. And I understand you have a great economics department here. See, that's how they got me here. They told me about the good economics department, so I knew there'd be good students here. No, this is what really counts. Is that message is spread by teaching, in politics and in learning. It's through the internet. When I first started looking for information in the 1970s and in 1960s, actually it was in the late 50s and 60s, it was hard to find books. And I resorted to getting a lot of my books from the Foundation for Economic Education, Leonard Reed's group up in Irvington, in New York. But now there's no excuse. You have so much available to you, and it does spread. And I understand there's something called YouTube and a few things like that out there that circulates a lot of information. So this to me is just a delightful time to change our ways. But if we do the wrong things, it'll be prolonged. Today, in Japan, yesterday they had an election. They threw the guys. They've been in the party that's been in there for 50 years because they've been in a type of a recession since 1989. Their stock market hit at 4,000. I think it's around 11,000 or something now because they keep propping up the bad debts and all the mistakes. So they've never allowed a correction. We're doing the same thing. We did it in the Depression. And the worst part about this story, as of the moment, they believe in their hearts that they're successful. I mean, they brainwash themselves, and they'll say, they have a clunker program, car sales go up. Oh, it's working, it's working. So they want more and more of this. All it's going to do is prolong it. Now, if we did the right thing, it wouldn't be that bad. It has to be a correction. Corrections are good. there's a mistake, you got to correct it. If you're in too much debt, you got to get out of debt. If you personally are in debt, you need to do 2 jobs and spend less, get out of debt. But a country has to do the same thing, or you compound your problems. And but if you did it that way, there would be some tough days. But the tough days would be because of the extravagance and the bad policies of the last 30 or 40 years, not because you're correcting the problems. And that's a difficult idea to sell, because as soon as there's problems, even right now, they're trying to play the same game as they did in the 30s. Oh, the 30s came about. Had nothing to do with the Federal Reserve. It had to do with capitalism and the gold standard, and that's why we had this depression. And right now, it was too much freedom, not enough regulation that was our problem. So they're dumping on more and more. But if we did the right things, we probably could be out of this in a year. And yeah, people would have to go back to savings. But just think of your incentives, because on top of the list, if you had a true reversal of the policies, you cut the foreign nonsense, you cut the welfare nonsense, but everybody gets a tremendous bonus because there'd be no income tax. Now, what's the likelihood of us getting some people up in Washington and gradually get a majority and start voting this way? Don't hold your breath, because that's not good for your health. No, that's not going to happen, but you're still going to get an opportunity, because this system isn't going to work. And I think there's going to be a de facto nullification. I think eventually what happens is that the current system will just be ignored. People will just quietly walk away because they won't trust the government. That's why they're angry. They don't trust the government. Liberals don't like it because the government's not sending them enough. Conservative and libertarians are concerned because they're paying all the bills. So everybody's upset and angry. But when it stops working, people will keep working. I mean, this happened in other countries. They always had a huge underground in the Soviet system. And it was well known in Italy, the more trouble they had, more socialized they had, the bigger the underground economy was. Now, I'm not advocating the underground economy, but I am advocating a system of government that would prevent the need for that. But I'm just saying that's a possibility that the federal government will become neutralized, and people will just take it upon themselves to do what they need to survive. Because the biggest threat in a financial way, in a political way, to us today is the dollar, the destruction of the dollar. And it's being held up artificially. The world still trusts it, and we buy their influence. We promise we'll defend them if you buy our dollars and don't crash the dollar. But they can't do it forever. I remember in the 1980s, they said the Japanese stock market would never crash because the banks owned all the stocks, and they always propped it up. But the markets are stronger than the government. And markets, even though this fiat dollar standard has existed since 1971, it's amazing that it has lasted this long, but it only made the bubble that much bigger. But the time will come when people will lose confidence around the world, and people in this country will lose confidence, which means prices are going to go up, and interest rates are going to go up, and the stage is set for rampant inflation. If you have a destruction of a currency, that means it goes to zero. That is dangerous, and that is what we should do our best. Hopefully, we'll come to our senses and call it off and come back with a little bit of restraint on the printing presses, but there's no signs that will happen. So it is the generation of individuals between the age of 15 and 25 that really have it cut out for you. Because I believe in that age group, you'll make that decision in the next 5, 10, 15 years on exactly what kind of world and what kind of country we're going to have. But we don't know when that's going to come. Now, if they move this thing along rather rapidly and we start stirring up a war with the Iranians and Pakistan gets annoyed with us killing people over there, I mean, there could be a geopolitical event that would cause chaos enough to just totally erode the foundation. The foundation is really gone, but it just could be toppled. Just like the financial system in August of 2008, I think the professors that understand Austrian economics knew that it it was a bubble that was going to burst, and it did, and we weren't surprised. But the same thing happens with the dollar. But the people, even though we might have said it was coming, we didn't know that it was going to really burst in, I guess, by August or September in 2008. And we don't know when people will lose the confidence in the dollar, and it could come in a month or it could come in 10 years as far as I'm concerned. But we're gradually every day getting closer to that. But the wonderful thing is we have good history. We have better history than most other countries because there was a time we understood and respected property rights. We understood contracts. We understood sound money. We understood personal liberty and freedom of speech and freedom of religion. So these things have been known. You take a country like Russia, they never had as much respect for those issues as we have. So we have reason to be optimistic that if we just wake up and do the right things, that we can overcome this. The thing that I would advise everybody, if you happen to ask me, that is that if you're concerned and thinking about this and studying economics and studying political thought, that I think the most important thing you can do is diverse yourself from partisan politics. I don't think there's any benefit by being a strong partisan. Now, that doesn't mean I have disowned the Republican Party, but it means that it's much more important to understand Nixon's admonition back in the 70s when Bretton Woods broke down, when he said that we're all Keynesians now. What we need to do is change it around and say that we're all Austrians, all Misesians, all libertarians now. But I do want to spend a couple minutes on the issue of the Federal Reserve. My name has been associated with the Federal Reserve for a few years. Back in the 80s, I introduced, well, almost every time in Washington, I've introduced a bill to audit the Federal Reserve. But the most signatures I ever had was about 18. And so right now, most of you probably have heard that the 1207 audits the Federal Reserve. We now have 82 co-sponsors, all the Republicans, over 100 Democrats on that bill. Now, let me assure you, that's rather remarkable for one of Ron Paul's bills in Washington. But it's also a sign that perseverance can help and work, and also in approaching crisis or being in the midst of a crisis, and the American people waking up and say, we want transparency. We want to know what's going on. You gave away $700 billion in TARP funds, and the Congress doesn't even know where it went, and people got all these huge bonuses. Then all of a sudden they've looked into and started listening about the Federal Reserve and find out that they deal with even bigger sums of money. And they can do deals with other governments, with other central banks, international financial organizations, and private corporations. We don't know who they are or what they do, what markets they interfere with. They are Fed is one of the 4 members of the President's Working Group on Financial Markets, which are designed to interfere in markets to smooth them out. That is, fix prices, go in and buy and sell to try to settle the market. But we're not allowed to know what they do. But an audit of the Fed would help tell us about this. They will not relinquish lightly. There's been a couple lawsuits filed against the Federal Reserve, and there's been a recent one. I guess it was Bloomberg won the case and said that the Federal Reserve would have to tell, under the Freedom of Information Act, tell who some of these loans were made to. And but the Fed that's going to be a long time. I'm glad they're doing that. And even with the audit bill, the most important thing about the audit bill is the attention that the Federal Reserve is getting. Matter of fact, if next month they come in and they twist the arms of the leadership and they say, absolutely nothing is going to be passed, we're not going to give you anything, believe me, that will be more of an incentive for the American people to demand even louder to find out what they're doing. But you know, their argument is, well, if you do that, we don't want you to get involved in politicized monetary policy. Like if we knew what they did last year and who got the loans, that was politicizing it. But it's not politicizing it if a Federal Reserve chairman pursues a monetary policy that benefits the president, so the president reappoints him as chairman of the Federal Reserve Board. And I guess it's not politicizing it, if Goldman Sachs has an influence on the Federal Reserve and Treasury, which they always do. Oh, that's not political. But if you happen to find out a little bit about the Federal Reserve, and the Congress finds out a little bit about the Federal Reserve, oh, you're going to disrupt things. Tonight there was somebody arguing against what I want to do, and he was saying on TV that we don't need this at all. He said that this would just cause a lot more trouble. It would cause instability in the markets. And he says, I want to see a Federal Reserve that gives us a sound dollar. I was thinking if I was there, I might point out to him that, yes, the Federal Reserve has given us a sound dollar, soundly worth 4 cents on the dollar from when they started. So this as I said, once I get involved in wanting to make you a better person or the world a better, or other countries a better place, and have a fair and equal society, it's only done at the expense of liberty. And the purpose of liberty for me personally is that the reason that I think our lives are important, not only do I believe they come from a creator, but I believe that the goal that we should have is to strive for virtue and excellence. And if you're struggling to stay out of prison from an authoritarian government all your life, you have not much chance to use the creative energy that all of us have been given in our effort to strive for caring for our families and striving for excellence and virtue and be as creative as we can. So there's no doubt in my mind of the values of a free society. I think where we come up short, those of us who believe in limited government and constitutional government, where we come up short is we lose actually the economic and the moral argument, because the proponents of big government grab the moral high ground. They say, we care about people. You who don't believe in these government programs, that you don't care. But the whole thing is, if you really care about people, if you are the strictest humanitarian on all of earth, you would argue for freedom. Because that is the only system that has ever solved the problem of poverty and famine. The freer a country, the more prosperous it is, the better we eat and the more we have. And this whole notion that if we don't endorse government largesse, which is stealing, it's immoral to steal, it's immoral to tell other countries what to do, it's immoral to have preemptive preventative war, it's immoral for our CIA to go over and murder people. And if we believe in the other, believe me, this is what would take care of the maximum number of people. Would it be a perfect society? In no way. We're not going to see a perfect society, but it would be the best ever. And we were approaching that. We were moving in that direction because we had the best opportunity. We had the best defense of liberty in this country than any other country. So we became the most prosperous country, but we have lost our way. We have gone a long way from that. We have lost our confidence. We don't have the belief that freedom works. That most people will say, yes, you're right, I believe, I agree with you, but you need this and you need this and this. Everybody has one exception to the rule. But if you give up a little bit and say that we have to give this much because there's a great need, you've given up 100% of the principle, and then that leads on and on. To more and more. So if we want to live in a better world, what we have to do is first understand where our rights come from, defend personal liberty, understand economics. Ultimately, to sell this to a large number of people, would have to support this because it's in their interest. If they think they're going to suffer from a free society and you need this government to take care of them, then that won't work. But it also takes a moral society, and the founders understood this, that freedom doesn't work if you have an immoral society. So I think even though if you had zero compassion the system would still take care of the most people. But it would also be much, much better if you had a compassionate society and that people did. You know, compassion, not only making sure you took care of yourself, your family, your neighbors, or in your church, but taking care of anybody that had needs. I think, you know, in this big debate on medical care, I've made the point, you know, that there are private hospitals. The first hospital I ever worked in, I moonlighted when I was drafted in the military. I worked for $3 an hour. And I was in the Santa Rosa Hospital in San Antonio. It was a church hospital. It was before Medicaid. And everybody got taken care of. And doctors worked for less. Everybody got charged the least amount. And people weren't lying out on the streets not without medical care. But the more charitable society is, and the more responsible society is, the more the criticism would be neutralized. But the truth is, if in a free society somebody happens to be very narrow-minded and he just happens to be a very, very good businessman, and he's dedicated to making profits for his company and giving jobs to people, that's still a great contribution. And then that means you can have a choice on what to do with your money left over, how charitable you want to be. The other day in my district, I had a town hall meeting, and it was in a conservative audience, and I was really surprised because we were talking about all the spending and how bad Obama was and all this stuff. And she got up and she was annoyed because we were talking about cutting off money to Honduras. And I said, well, look, I said, I'm against all foreign aid, so I'm not against Honduras. But I told her that I said, now, if we had a free and prosperous society, you would have a lot more money in your pocket. If you felt sorry for the people in Honduras and want to help somebody, you can send them all the money you want, and you can go down and join their army if you want, but just don't send the other people's kids to do that. I would like to just finish on a positive note and say that the country is awakening. The revolution is alive and well. And if you continue it, you will see only positive changes. Thank you very much.